Those were wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am a content expert on the menstrual cycle panel for Our Bodies, Ourselves Today, and I'm thrilled to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Noelle Elizabeth Spencer. Dr. Spencer is a passionate advocate for menstrual equity and a distinguished mixed method researcher dedicated to advancing health equity. Her work focuses on improving health outcomes and access to health information and education, efforts that align perfectly with the goals of today's summit. As a content expert for Our Bodies Ourselves and a thought leader in the field, Dr. Spencer explores innovative ways to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion into the menstrual equity and period poverty movements. Her research has a global reach, co-creating progressive menstrual health policies that improve lives around the world. Today, she will share her insights on the current states and emerging priorities of the menstrual equity movement, helping us to deepen our understanding of where we stand, where we need to go, and how we can each play a role in creating meaningful change. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Noelle Elizabeth Spencer.
Everyone. Yeah, I just need to know how to hold, please, technical issues.
No promises, but
I think mine just might be behind it. I just don't know where the mouse is.
Is this it?
Yeah, but it just needs to do the title. Or, hold on. Do you think we can pull it up on this side too?
Maybe. I mean, definitely.
Okay. Feel free to get the wiggles out and stuff while we're figuring this out. All right, thank you so much.
And then there's the mouse.
Okay, just make it this one. Underneath. Oh, thank you, Carla. Okay, fabulous. All right, I'm going to test out one of these. See how this goes. Oh, the power. Okay. Good morning. Hi, I'm Noelle. So I thought we could start by taking a deep breath together. Just get us centered in the space. So with that, breathe in and hold and out. Thank you. All right. So when I was 13, one of my ovaries decided to exit this party. Yes, one of these gals. And I won't lie, that exit was painful. There I was, a nerdy, still am, teen, managing major surgery recovery with the 8th grade, and with PCOS. That was in there too. So now with an absent organ and a lifelong condition of PCOS, I proceeded tumbling into my teenage years. But this isn't a sad story. It's actually a story about privilege, and more specifically, access, how I learned that I had it and what I chose to do with it. So privilege of access. My parents both had health insurance through their jobs, which afforded them, and through them, me, access to top-tier healthcare providers. This is important if you're going to lose an organ. Privilege of education. As a young girl/teenager, I had access to comprehensive sexual and reproductive health education during several years of middle school, in high school, and also in my church. Privilege of community support. While I did face some stigma and intense confusion from my young peers about my illness, my church and my community cheered me on during my physical recovery, and even my school supported me by making accommodations to our uniform policy, which at the time was very attractive little skirts, as I healed from a nearly hip-to-hip scar. So while I don't sugarcoat trauma, the entire experience opened doors for me of curiosity, and over the ensuing years, I pursued sexual and reproductive health knowledge relentlessly. middle school and high school independent studies, and very supportive biology teachers turned into an undergrad degree in gender and sexuality studies. During this degree, I came face to face with exactly how much I had been privileged by my access to resources, including education. Especially when I and a group of other undergraduate students were asked to teach sex ed at a local middle school, because the principal was concerned with the fact that all that his students learned about sexual and reproductive health was in biology class. That's fine. About elephants. Yes, these gals. Less fine. So began my journey into providing access to education as a resource, and my blossoming understanding of health equity, alongside my relentless pursuit of sexual and reproductive health and rights knowledge that continued through my master's, where I focused on surrogacy policies abroad, to my post-grad research, where we did a bit of a change and mainly focused on people who use substances and stigma against those populations, and all the way through to my PhD. When tasked with defining my research focus for my dissertation, I chose menstrual health for many reasons. Because it intersected so well with my focus on sexual and reproductive health, because aspects of it were understudied and underfunded and still are, and because of menstrual equity. The question of privilege and access still fascinated me. What resources were out there? Who has them? Who doesn't? And how can we bridge the gaps? How can we achieve equity? And menstrual equity was tied up in it all. Access, education, community support, it's all there. A complex array of challenges impacting the health, experiences, and overall lives of women, girls, and people with periods. Delving into the world of menstrual equity allowed my personal to become professional. So that takes us to today, where I will regale you with just the highlights of 2 of my doctoral research studies to delve deeper into this topic of menstrual equity and the experiences of those who work on it and how we can move forward. So going into this work, I had 3 main questions. You will hear more than 3 on this slide. The who of it all, who is doing this work, how are they coming into this work? How are we bringing each other to the table? What does it look like to build community? What can we as menstrual advocates and activists do on a policy level to work towards achieving menstrual equity? Now, we won't get to all of this in 20 minutes. Remember, just the highlights. So what was this research? It was interviews. So 35 audio-recorded virtual in-depth, mouthful, semi-structured interviews with 16 US participants and 19 in the UK. And concept mapping with 51, 28 in the US and 23 in the UK individuals who were invited to participate initially. 33 completed brainstorming and sorting and rating, and 34 completed our interpretation step. So who was I talking to? For interviews, these were individuals or employees, members, or volunteers within an organization that promoted menstrual equity and awareness of period poverty through research, advocacy, and/or activism. The goal of the concept mapping exercise was to elicit views about the creation of policies to combat period poverty and advance menstrual equity. This was relevant to a varied group of stakeholders, including advocates and activists involved in menstrual equity and period poverty work, academics and researchers, graduate-level students engaged in this work, as well as policymakers who had in the past or were currently working on policy related to legislation to assist with menstrual equity and period poverty. And everyone needed to live or work or study in the US or the UK for these studies. So taken together, the key research findings of these studies related to money and funding, language and framing, building menstrual equity community, menstrual equity education, and of course, policy. So who is doing this work? The answer, a lot of people. Across diverse communities, yes, but with some significant gaps, silos, and divisions. In looking to understand who was doing this work and how they or we were bringing diverse voices to the table, I had the great opportunity to hear how different individuals found themselves joining the movement. I called these points of entry, and found through listening to their stories that many of the more common points of entry shared a theme: observations of inequities. Witnessing inequities experienced by others, just like that call to action I felt when I learned that students in the 2000s were still being taught about elephants instead of their own agentic bodies, might and have served as a call to action to join the menstrual equity movement. This is important for a number of reasons, including its ability to inform recruitment and marketing. If we know where most folks enter, we know where, and we know a little bit about how to connect and to recruit. Now, another layer of this is inclusion, the who of who we're bringing to the table. From these conversations, it also became clear that intentional inclusion can be present in all aspects of an organization, from the governing documents to the selection of leadership. Participants who expressed the importance of meeting people where they are promoted tolerance and the importance of fully understanding the myriad opinions and perspectives of the individuals involved in the menstrual equity movement, even if we do not always agree. For one participant whose words stuck with me, true inclusion meant critically evaluating the approachability and accessibility of these movements for all people. An important tool of intentional representation is the language that organizations use when speaking or writing about menstruation. Having successful conversations about menstruation depends on a number of factors, relating both to the language used and the tolerance shown to those who make mistakes or require a different approach. Bless you. Language is such a key component. From interviews, I became more and more curious about how we as a global community were talking about menstruation. Specifically, I was curious about what terms we were using and what we meant by those terms. How are we defining these words that we use? Are we understanding each other? Use of inclusive language, i.e. terms like menstruator, differs as the desire to use it. The choice of how to refer to people who have periods was mixed in my studies, with some of those participating in the study choosing to use gender-neutral terms such as menstruator, people, or students, and others choosing gender-specific terms such as women and girls. I found it interesting to note that those who chose to use the gender-neutral term menstruator were primarily US participants. Adoption of inclusive language has not been equally accepted across those working to improve menstrual equity. It is important to know and recognize this. Building community often requires us to continuously build and navigate shared language too. Unsurprisingly, money, both the presence and the absence of it, played a key role in conversations about the current states and emerging priorities of the menstrual equity movement, as well as opportunities for policy work in the future. Funding is necessary for the successful implementation of policy. I'll say it again. Funding is necessary for the successful implementation of policy. Funding initiatives can include state and federal level allocations, funding for organizations and elimination of taxes and costs associated with menstrual products. Lack of funding for paid roles was a barrier to hiring full-time employees and may ultimately threaten the overall sustainability of work of the menstrual equity and period poverty movements if we can't keep good people in their roles. Overarching barriers to participation in the menstrual equity movement, including lack of funds to pay individuals for their work or their time, and also money to facilitate entrance or inclusion in spaces at all, such as at conferences, which sometimes can cost out individuals who want to come, and in workplaces. Lack of funding was also a barrier to inclusion of marginalized populations, with one participant sharing, people who are from diverse backgrounds and not gainfully employed, specifically, often don't get heard. Education emerged as a main priority in policy conversations, integral to addressing menstrual equity and alleviating period poverty. From these conversations, it was clear that in the minds and work of many on menstrual equity, education can take many forms. From formalized, school-based menstrual health education for students of all gender identities, to outreach offered to members of the public of all ages. Initiatives to increase and improve menstrual health education can and should occur in multiple settings, from schools to healthcare facilities to public outreach efforts. Many individuals and institutions can act as facilitators of policy initiatives. These include parents, teachers, schools, passionate individuals, and government. Policy is for and impacts everyone, everywhere. This research overall, and the stories and insights that were shared, collectively told a larger story about equity, privilege, and access, and what we can do with what we have, and what we have learned and hope for the future, because the future is hopeful. None of this work happens in a vacuum. While I entered into my research with defined questions, from the generous stories that my participants shared, coupled with my academic, work, and volunteer experiences, I took away many lessons from the experience of conducting this work, 3 of which I will share today. Many of those who work in and/or are passionate about menstrual equity work in community. A community can be many things, from grassroots organizations to groups of researchers to coalitions of legislators. Any passionate group of people can form a community. So as you spend today together, I invite you to think about your ideal menstrual equity community members. How can you build community in small ways, starting today, with the people in this room? And even more importantly, who are you inviting to your table? It quickly became clear in conversations with advocates, activists, and researchers alike, it was important to critically engage, and that divisions and challenges present opportunities for collaboration, as long as all those involved are willing to critically engage. Highlighting diverse perspectives can expand existing conversations and the representation of more people by inviting new and nuanced perspectives into the space. To engage intentionally and critically with diverse populations in relation to such a complex topic like menstrual equity, I have invited myself and invite you to engage with the following questions. To know how to work with others, we have to first know ourselves. So what is your why? What are you curious about? How can we meet people where they are? And what are the gaps, both in your own work, perhaps, but also in the field at large that you can fill? Finally, celebration. As we move through the world, and specifically the US policy landscape that we exist in right now, it will be more important than ever before to celebrate our wins while acknowledging our losses. Strong community is built on a foundation of trust and optimism, but no room for toxic positivity, though. Being welcomed into the menstrual equity community changed my academic trajectory, and dare I say, changed my life. The openness, curiosity, and compassion that this community greeted me with has been truly magical, and I'm grateful and hopeful for what we are building together. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for being here, and if you'd like to connect, my socials are on the screen. Thank you.